Hello, and welcome back to the second part of choosing your venue from a photographer's perspective. Last week we chatted about the getting ready space, and this week we're chatting about your ceremony site and things to consider when you are looking at where you would like to get married. So, the first thing that I want to mention when we talk about your ceremony site is the ceremony is the most important part of the wedding day. It's where you make these promises to each other, and it's really the whole purpose of all of this planning. So, something to think about as we go into chatting about your ceremony site is thinking about the words that you want to say to each other, and then closing your eyes and imagining where you will be when you say them. If the two of you are religious, then maybe this answer is easy for you. You know you want to get married in a church. If a church is not a necessity for the two of you, then I hope that you are able to choose a location that is still meaningful to the two of you and your love story. Maybe that's like a family historical site or something that you love to do together, whether that be hiking and there's a beautiful view and your venue can give you that same feeling, or maybe it's just something as simple as you both love modern, simple design. And so you choose a venue that reflects that. But I just hope that the number one thing that you think about is that you choose a location with meaning to the two of you. Next, you want to make sure that wherever you guys choose, the venue that you choose has an inclement weather plan, or that that's something that you can talk to your wedding planner as well as the venue coordinator with. So if the hopes are that you want to get married outside, then you'll want to make sure that there is an option to set up a tent if it's necessary. Either the venue that you're working with has a tent to use or a rental company that they work with. While tents can be expensive, you just have to think of it as bad weather insurance. Obviously, we can't control the weather, but you still have to carry on with the wedding day despite the weather. So tents can be an option. Some venues do offer an indoor location, and then you don't have to worry about setting up a tent. But that's just something that you have to consider and talk with the wedding venue coordinator as well as your wedding planner, and making sure that you and your partner are both still going to be happy if plan B ends up happening for the day. So next I want to chat about the lighting. Obviously, I'm going to bring this up because as your photographer, I still want you to have beautiful pictures no matter where you end up getting married. If you're getting married indoors or in a church, then I do want to specify that it's actually not preferable to have a spotlight just on the bride and groom. What ends up happening then is if there's a spotlight just on the two of you, then your whole wedding party that's up at the front with you is going to be in the dark. I can't expose for both of you. So if I'm exposing for just the couple that's getting married, then your bridal party is going to be in the dark. If I'm exposing for your bridal party, then the two of you in the middle are going to be way too bright. I try not to use flash when it's an indoor wedding or really at any time during the ceremony, because I just feel like that detracts from the moment and that intimacy of the most important part of the wedding day. So I try to keep flash to a minimum when I'm shooting the ceremony. If you are in a church or at an indoor location and you have a say in the way the lighting is set up, then make sure to ask that the lighting is as even as possible across both you and your partner and your bridal party and anybody that's up front with you. If you also have a say in perhaps the church, an awesome thing is I've been to some churches where they have a dome that's up above, and that acts as a natural light diffuser, which makes the lighting really nice and even across everybody. Obviously, that's not going to be an option for all churches or all ceremonies, but just some things to consider if you are having an indoor ceremony. If you choose to have an outdoor ceremony, here are some things to think about. And I'm going to bring in some helpers to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So we have Woody and Jessie that are getting married, right? And if you have a say in your lighting and the direction that you face in relation to the sun, it is preferable that you either have the sun directly behind you and your wedding party or directly in front of. Either way, if it's one or the other, everybody on this same plane is going to be in the same lighting. That means I can properly expose for everybody that's up there. They will all be the same exposure, and they will all be in the same lighting. Now, if you have the lighting that's directly to the side, what you have happen is his face is either going to be completely lit up by the sun because he's taller than Jessie, and Jessie's face will be in the shade. Or if the sun is on this side, then Jessie's face is again in the shade because she is in his shadow. So the lighting gets a little bit trickier if the sun is to the side rather than directly in front or behind you and your wedding party. Now, again, a lot of times you're not going to have control over where the ceremony is taking place in relation to the sun. If you don't get to choose where you get to pick, or perhaps you love the view from a certain spot and it's not going to be facing the sun in one of those two directions, the other option that you can do, or that I would suggest, is to have a later ceremony start time. Don't start your ceremony at 12 o'clock when the sun is directly overhead and all the shadows are so dark and the highlights are so bright and that contrast is just really deep. Instead, have a later start time that's closer to sunset. That is going to soften those shadows and make your contrast a lot softer. So while we still will have some of those shadows happening on each other's faces, they won't be as harsh as they would be if you had an earlier start time. I generally would recommend 2 to 3 hours before sunset. That way you have nice, a little bit softer lighting, but still enough time after the ceremony is over to get portraits done. And then those portraits are getting done and taken during the prettiest, like dreamiest, warmest light of the day anyway. So it's really ideal all around to have a later ceremony start time. So the last thing I just want to mention when you're thinking about your ceremony location is to be aware of any rules or restrictions that the ceremony or venue has. Some churches have restrictions on if their photographer can use flash or where they can stand during the ceremony. There are also some locations, if you want to have your ceremony perhaps like in the national or state park, then of course there's going to be required permits for that. So just making sure that you're checking in on that. And if you guys decide that you want to do something fun as you are exiting from your ceremony, the recessional, as you're coming out, say you want to have like bubbles, or if you want to have people throw birdseed or throw flower petals, then just making sure that the venue is okay with that. So these are all my tips that I have for when you're thinking about your ceremony site and choosing your wedding venue and thinking about them from a photographer's perspective so that you can make sure you get the best photos possible for your ceremony. Next week, we're going to be talking about portrait locations in relation to choosing your venue. So tune in then, and thanks for listening.